What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from Zoom again, and this time we are here with Dominic of And Rain. It is great to be able to talk with you. Thanks for coming on the show today, man.
Thanks, Alex.
Yep. Huge shout out to our friend Dwid and Integrity for connecting us.
You're the best.
Yep. Shout out to Integrity. So it's so awesome to have you here because your album, The Way of All Flesh is Decay, is absolutely kick-ass from start to finish. I couldn't put this album down. Was there sort of like a preconceived vision behind what you wanted this to be, being that this was a debut? Was there some sort of idea, or was this like almost a very like experimental process, throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what sticks?
It's kind of a little bit of both. Usually when I write songs, it's in a very, I call it in a cinematic fashion, like for Integrity, for instance. It's much more, there's a beginning and an end. And then you figure out how you get to the end from the beginning. You know, musically, there's ups and downs. It's like a roller coaster. There's a lot of moving parts. And with Rain, I decided I was going to try something different and kind of take the AC/DC approach and just go with a verse chorus. I limit myself to a verse chorus, bridge structure, like a more traditional type thing, which I've never done before because my bands are always like the point A to point B way of writing a song. So this was a challenge for me. And, you know, we took a swing at it. I think it worked out great. It makes it a lot easier to listen to because it warrants more repeat listens because it's hookier. You know, it's just more to connect with.
Yeah.
Rather than if you're not willing to commit to a whole big thing, then this is, you know, much more digestible piece of music to listen to.
Well, you mentioned too the cinematic aspect of it, and I'm really glad you mentioned that because that was almost kind of like my way of it. It had like this epic heaviness feel to it, and I don't say this in a negative way, but like that's not a word I would use to really describe hardcore. I never like thought hardcore was very cinematic in a way where there's like a build up and a climax and like a conclusion. It's just constantly in your face. So creatively, was this a very different mind frame than what you've done with Integrity or Pulling Teeth or Virgin Witch versus any other project, or is there still a method behind the madness that kind of like applies to everything?
It's still a method behind the madness. My technique has always been to I write like mini songs, which is just like one riff, and I just kind of like file them, and then I listen to them, and I find the ones that work together, and you know, build a song. I'm like, all right, I'll group these ones together, these mini songs, and you kind of like, you know, it's like clay. You working with clay, you just put like different elements together, and you fine tune it until you get to where. I mean, it's never finished. I could have spent even more time on the End Rain record, and it could have turned out different. You know, you got to be able to. It's finished for now, is what a lot of people usually say. You know, so I have to be content with where it was when it was time to leave off, or we'd be tinkering with it forever. But it's a little bit of both. I think, you know, it's a little bit of how I normally do things, and like I said, it was a little bit of forcing myself into the box of, you know, going for that traditional format and seeing what happens.
Was there, because as somebody who's interviewed Mike from All Out War before, and Adam from Pig Destroyer, and Misery Index, and the 300 other bands that he's in, as somebody who's interviewed them, they've all had their own unique creative ways of really how they would create the music that they do. With all of you coming together, being from different projects, was it almost, did it feel like you were almost kind of like combining forces together to create this project? Like, let's take a little bit of Integrity and a little bit of Misery Index and a little bit of All Out War, or were you all trying to like step into territory that you never really did?
Yes and no, because the record was completely written musically before anyone even heard it. Like I wrote it during COVID. We put all the music together, and Mike did all the vocals and the lyrics. But as far as when it was time to present the music to Jarvis and to Art and Sebastian, it was already done. And how it spins into a yes is that all of those guys are such like unique players that it wasn't like play this to the T. It was like, here's a song, do what you want. You know what I mean? So you can put your own stamp on how you do it. So I think their influence on the songs came out in that way, where it was like, you know, like an after the fact almost, you know what I mean? And it really does sound like those five people are playing on the record when you listen. If you're familiar, if you're like one of the five people that know all five bands and like all five bands, then you'll notice. But it's like, you'll see that it sounds like the sum of its parts, which is really cool and exciting because it's just like I feel like I picked all the best possible dudes to do it.
Yeah. Adam, I've noticed Jarvis is like the king of raw drumming because like with Misery Index and Pig Destroyer and a lot of his playing with a scowl, like there, or not scowl, scour.
Scour, yeah.
Yep, mix them all, mix up. He's always playing like raw, like brutal. Like I'll never see that guy play on like a prog metal band or something like that. You know what I mean?
He would kill it though. I think he just, we used to call it our Joker name for him in the studio was everything but the kitchen sink because every fill is like, it's like all over the place, and it's awesome. You know what I mean? It makes it really exciting to listen to.
Yeah,
If you just from start to finish from the drum perspective, it's like he always does little cool things to keep it interesting.
yeah.
Like
Shout out to Adam.
he's the
Um,
best.
with every how different of a mind frame were you going into this? You mentioned like this whole cinematic aspect and everything, but like but you also have like the method behind the madness. Was there any were you almost like expressing a different side of yourself than what we would hear off of Integrity or Pulling Teeth or Virgin Witch, etc.? Like is this a
Yeah,
side of you we never seen before?
only in the sense that it was I like have really severe ADD and ADHD, which is also attributes to why I write songs the way I do in that like linear like cinematic fashion that we discussed. And yeah, with this it was like, a conscious effort. Like it was literally like my rules were that it has to be in that it has to follow that format. And I wanted everybody in the band to be people that I've never played music before. I mean, I've dabbled with Sebastian. I think I played on a Noisem song when they were an active band back in the day. I played on the Decibel Flex that they did. But for the most part, I wanted to go into a studio I've never been with guys I've never been with, and just kind of like because Dwight and I have collaborated for decades now, and like everyone in Pulling Teeth is in and out of other things I'm doing. Like everyone's still tight friends and like help each other out, with whatever you need musically and whatnot. So it was a conscious effort to like try to like just think outside the box and have different people work on it and have them bring something new to the table. So in a way that was challenging too because I'm used to working with the usual suspects. So
Mhm. But
that was different.
but you've also have played live for other bands. Like I believe you played live for Ringworm a couple of
Yep.
shows, and you've also played live with Noisem as you mentioned and whatnot. Does maybe playing with other projects allow you to bring new things into another project, or do you try to kind of like leave everything where they are?
I feel like when it's me writing, it's like I don't know, it's like dragging a wet towel behind you and whatever sticks to it is kind of like what goes into the sauce. That sounds gross, but you know what I mean? It's
Hmm.
like I just kind of collect little ideas from everywhere and just tack it to the mental bulletin board. And when it comes time to put it together, there's a lot of different things you can pick and choose from. And I like that to happen organically and just like without putting much thought into it. It's kind of just like, all right, what's this going to be? Let's conjure it up. It's not really a hey, I'm going to write a song that's like XYZ. It's always just like the songs come. There's always that river in my head where it's like the songs are always there. It's just about how I harnessed it and like brought it into the out of the dream world and into the real world, like Nightmare on Elm Street. Like and it was more like that. But of course, Ringworm's one of my favorite bands. Of course, there's a huge Ringworms. There's always been a Ringworm stamp on everything I do.
Yeah.
It's like a direct cousin to Integrity musically. So
I,
that's my bread and butter as far as my biggest influences go.
oh my God, Ringworm! They still kill it to this day. Like
Yeah.
Human Furnace is just a madman. I love that. I interviewed him twice, and it was always a good interview. I love how they sound test to looks that kill.
He's amazing. I got to play with him in 2004 and in 2014, so like 10 years apart.
Wow.
And I was hoping an opportunity would come up this year because it's 2024. Is it 2024? No, next year will be 2024.
Yeah.
If it happens next year, will be good.
Wow, that's a sign. I like finding those like patterns and whatnot.
Yeah.
I just remember being so shocked that he wasn't from Brooklyn just because of the music that he plays and the way that he talks. Like I like when he said he was from Ohio. I'm like, no, you're not. No way. I
He's
don't
a
believe this.
great guy.
You sound like one of us. So
No, he's a great guy.
yeah,
Very, very underrated vocalist as well. A lot of people.
definitely, definitely. I mean, just listen to Snake Church to people watching this if you haven't already. When it comes to getting that inspiration to write, though, to get that like creative fire, does the inspiration strike out of nowhere in a way, or do you almost kind of go looking for it?
It's like a river that's running parallel to me in real time. You know what I mean? It just depends whether I turn my brain off and go over there, or I'm staying in the real world with my job and my kids and regular life. It's like being able to just turn off. It's always there. It's always. If you ask me to make up a song, I can just like disappear for an hour and come back with the song because that station's always in my head. It's always on. But it's a matter of finding what's going on in there and tuning in and turning it into something that you could bring back across. But there's always music playing in my head 24/7. It's just impossible to get it all out. it's maddening at times.
Do you find it better to come up with ideas when you're more alone in isolation, being that that's such a great feel for creativity, or do you prefer to maybe be around other people, whether it be your bandmates or your family or whatever, to
It just
cultivate?
happens when it happens. It's kind of like when it's time, it's time. It's not really something I could set out to do. I'm not going to sit down and be like, let me get the mood right and see what happens. It's kind of like, oh, and this has been ever since day of mourning in the '90s, like when I was a teenager. But I used to have a little tape recorder I would just bring with me, and if I had an idea, it just hits when it hits. Now I can do it on my phone, just like sing the thing I have in my phone, and then come home and flesh it out. But yeah, it's always something where inspiration strikes when it's time.
Mm.
It's appropriate.
Or when it's the most inconvenient too, right?
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Um, I mean, like, have you ever had like an inspiration strike you, like where where it was like the worst possible timing and you had to like memorize it the whole day?
Oh, geez. I mean, it's happened to me so many times, and I've had to come to terms. The way I like, because I used to be so meticulous about it and try to log every idea. I think everything had to be. I was really like, like I said, it was maddening because it's like just there all the time. But I kind of like a hack that I developed for myself was that if I don't remember it, it wasn't that good. It wasn't worth doing.
Yeah.
It's a way to feel less bad about it if I don't remember every little thing. But
Yeah.
I try to get every little thing in there,
Yeah.
put it down, see if it turns into something.
Yeah. How do you know when you're finished with a song?
Oh, you're never finished. Never. I listen to Integrity Howling or any Pulling Teeth record, or even Day Morning records, and I'm like, oh man, I would have loved it to go here instead of there. You just have to make peace with it and send it on its way and move on to the next thing. I'm not really, I know Integrity tinkers a lot with the back catalog and to like astonishing results, especially with the Seasons and the Size of Days one that's coming out. It's like stuff that's uncovered that nobody knew was there. It's like huge, like Heaven Inside Your Hell is like a rock opera now. It's amazing. And for me, it's just more about, in my process, I like to reinvent the idea moving forward instead of like, I feel like once it's out, it's out. It's like having a kid, you know what I mean? You can't put the kid back in and make some changes and have it again. It's like it's there, it's birthed. It's time to, move on to the next one, do the next thing. And that's been how I approach it instead. But I'm not saying one idea is better than the other. That's just the way I operate with stuff like that.
Well, all the bands that you've either played in or written for, like, are all really in your face and like really do capture a moment in a way. But if you work on a song for a longer period of time, is it make it like a little bit harder to maintain that moment? Like, I'll be honest with you, I never understood how like a hardcore band or even like a really brutal metal band without solos or whatever, just straight up riff fest. I never understood how for some of them it could take more than a couple hours to write those songs. Maybe I'm not in that band, so those type of bands, so I don't know, but I never understood how something that captures such a moment. It's like, oh yeah, we were working on that song for a year.
I think with some people, it's like it's way simpler than I think, and I'm like, I'm giving it way too much credit as far as an art form goes. That it takes a lot. I think some people can just do that, hammer out A, B, C, D, and you're done. But it's like I'm always on the search for the perfect part. I mean, there has to be a perfect part to every part of the song, or it doesn't sit right with me. I can never like half-ass writing a song and be like, oh, that has to be good enough. You know what I mean? It always has to be like, even behind the solo, that has to, when the riff changes, that riff has to be awesome. And I like key changes. I like surprise parts a lot, and those are all like stuff that's in my toolbox when I'm working on songs. But I think I have, and DeWitt and I share this. We have this in common, where it's like we have way too much of an attention to detail to be able to just relax and let it fall out. You know what I mean? It's just like almost over analyzing and meticulously lording over it, and destroying your mind in the process, trying to like just get it to a point where you're comfortable with everybody else hearing it and like where it represents what you're trying to create,
Yeah.
and execute.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people can just do it. They can just do riff A, riff B, and it sounds great. You know what I mean? I bet like can't imagine a lot of these songs are really rocket science, but they're
Well,
amongst my favorites.
well, I do got to ask this. This is like a silly question I like to ask people, but do you think we'll ever run out of riffs one day? Because artists have been telling me, like 9 times out of 10 when I interview somebody and they tell me like, oh, it all started off with a riff. Like there's 6 strings, 7 strings, 27 strings if you're in a prog band, but like there's only so many riffs that you could sort of like play, right? Am I wrong by that?
I agree, and it's interesting you say that because I have a friend that like he's a drummer in a doom band that was called Sons of Otis, and I think they're still. I'm not sure he still plays with them. I haven't talked to him in a minute, but he was a drummer for a long time. His name is Ryan Oppen, and he had sent me one of their records, and I'm like, man, all these riffs are really familiar. And he told me about how like the approach was, and I found this like super interesting, not to reinvent the wheel and try to write something that was unique, but kind of like try to create a familiarity by borrowing heavily from what already exists and like more about how it's played and what the vibe is. You know what I mean? And that like kind of like blindsided me in a way I've never thought about music before. Where I'm like, wow, you really can take this riff and play it in a different way, and it's a different way of regurgitating your influences. Instead of like hodgepodging a bunch of different things and making your own stew and putting it out that way. You can also be like, all right, here's what I think a Cro-Mag song on Best Wishes would sound like. And you kind of do that. And I think, as we progress and there's a million bands being born every minute, it's almost like, I don't see any other way but to go that route because everybody's thought of everything at this point.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've said it constantly, both on this channel and off, but like all the greatest pop hits from the last 40 years use the same four chords. But like,
yeah.
But I do think that the concept of being original, first off, I don't think originality necessarily means that something's good. And second of all, like, original is such an overrated concept. Andy Warhol, even one of the most famous artists, said, "Why do I have to be original? Why can't I be unoriginal?" Maybe that's what would make somebody original.
I think, you're going to nitpick originality. It's like, you might end up with something that you don't even want to listen to. You know what I mean? It sucks. And it's like, I don't know. I don't see much enjoyment from that. But it's like more about interpretation, I guess would be a good word to use. And it's just like presentation, just how you listen and digest, how you intake and digest what you're hearing and turn it into something that you want to say to the world. You know what I mean? I think it's like, it's a much more personal, it's, you can't make like a chart and be like, all right, let's list all the things that have never been done. Let's put let's make a death metal rap song. That's going to be awesome. It's not, it's going to suck,
I don't know. After Slayer put out Diabolos in Musica, I could officially say Tom Araya is my favorite rapper.
Oh, geez.
So.
But, and by all means, to each their own. If that's something, if someone wants to do rap and death metal and that makes them happy, then I'm happy for them. But for me, if you make a cake that tastes good, you're going to use things that make the cake taste good.
Yeah.
You're not going to introduce things just so you have the weirdest cake. You're not going to put black licorice in my cake and be like, joy.
What's wrong with black licorice, man?
I love black licorice. But,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
But speaking of rapping and death metal, you ever listen to the band Archspire?
I have not. And if it's rapping death metal, I probably wouldn't.
It's not rap. It's not rap and death metal. Like, it's guttural growls. But the way that he does his lyrics is very influenced by rap because he had, like, if it's one syllable over, like, it's the craziest death metal you'll ever hear. You got to look up that band, Archspire.
Okay. I mean, also, when you look at like something like Candiria, which was like super original. Nobody did anything like that, and that totally vibed with me and like connected. What the word I was looking for? I'm sorry, I go back, was authenticity. I think if your creation is just an authentic, representation of what it is you're trying to execute, then you're good. And I think that's going to translate, and people are going to find enjoyment rather than you just trying to do some alchemy for the sake of making the weirdest thing out there and like making it completely unlistenable.
Some bands
did have some rapping death metal that was good, so I take it back.
Well, I mean, there are some bands because there is authenticity. Like some bands, like In This Moment, where they portray like a character or something like that in a way. There's something authentic about that too, but I feel like with what Endrain does, it's so raw that what you see is what you get.
Yeah, it's just a sum of all the things I've liked during my life during this point in that umbrella of like, heavy metal and hardcore and stuff, that whole umbrella of extreme music, if you want to call it that. It's everything from being a sixth grader listening to Metallica to like going on a Bathory bender last year and just listening to nothing but Under the Sign of the Black Mark for like months. And it's like, it's weird. It comes in phases and different things hit at different times.
Definitely.
You never get the same recipe twice. Just if you work in real time, like that river I was talking about that's running in real time next to you, it's always going to be a different river every time you dip your feet in. You're going to get something new out of it.
Definitely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today, for such an awesome conversation. Most of all, thank you for this incredible, epic album. Is there just anything else with The Way of All Flesh is Decay that we could be expecting? This is out on Relapse now. Could we be expecting some touring, or what else are you allowed to talk about at this time, of course?
Touring is unfortunately not in the cards because everybody, like you mentioned, Jarvis is in 1,000 bands. Sebastian is really busy. He's in Exhumed, which is a very, as a schedule of 20 bands. And then, me and Mike have kids and careers, so it's hard for us to do stuff. And none of us could find art most of the time. So it's we kind of made a little, pact when we did this that if we played, it would have to be the 5 guys that are on the record. I don't want it to be like,
Yeah.
we got this guy playing instead because he couldn't make it. And not to, I understand that's a necessity in a band that's trying to, maintain a presence and do it, but that's not us, you know what I mean? So if the opportunity strikes and all 5 of us are in the same place at the same time, then there's nothing I would love more. I think that'd be really cool. And it could happen. We've talked about it. Just got to see. Hopefully something comes up.
Could there be more music in the future, though?
There could. It's right now I'm doing a couple songs for the Integrity record that's coming up. And I have a whole other record that's a different band that is yet unnamed. And it's more of a 1983 Ozzy, Dawkins, a little bit of Pentagram in the mix. It's very 1983, as I like to call it. That golden age of Motley Crue, Shout at the Devil, Bark at the Moon.
Hell yeah.
Era of heavy metal. And it's got Scott Angelicos from Bloodlight on vocals, who's he's an incredible vocalist. So I'm going to be working on that next. And it's just like everything else, it happens because it's necessary, not because I have any grand plan other than making it and giving birth and then moving on to the next thing,
Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much, everybody. We are here with End Rain, The Way of All Flesh is Decay. It is out now on Relapse Records. Be sure to pick that up. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Alex.